Good evening, and welcome to the 2019 LPS Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. I'm Karen Vermillion from Central Middle School, and I am your MC for this evening. The theme for our 2019 program is Lift Every Voice. The time is right, the time is now. Please stand for the presentation of our colors by the Buffalo Soldiers Lawton Fort Sill chapter, followed by our national anthem sung by a trio from Eisenhower High School.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
You may be seated. Thank you, Samantha Cook, Emily Gill, and Preston Meek from EHS for a powerful rendition of our national anthem. And thank you, Buffalo Soldiers, for presenting the colors. The Buffalo Soldiers are a local nonprofit organization. If you wish to contribute to their preservation of history, please see the program. Next, I'd like to introduce you to a very important member of our community. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the Mayor of Lawton, the Honorable Stan Booker.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for gathering here at Lawton High School for the Martin Luther King Jr. celebration of the Lawton Public Schools. It is an honor to be here and to join our school district commemorating the life and achievements of an amazing man, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., while also recognizing the service, dedication, and thriving spirit of those right here within our community. Special thanks to the leaders of Lawton Public Schools, Dr. Tom Deegan, Dr. Jamie Polk, and Mrs. Barbara Ellis, and all of the many teams and coordinators who have been a part of putting this program together. Your dedication to our students and city is unparalleled. This is an incredible time of year where we are reminded, because of your efforts and the efforts of other community advocates like you, of the selfless spirit of Lawton Fort Sill. The work of Dr. King was colossal, and the fruits of his labor changed the course of American history. He was a gracious, strategic, and fearless leader who believed that all people were equal, regardless of race, creed, or color. Today, we strive to continue his work for equality and honor his name with acts of service across our community each year. Join me on this special evening as we pay homage to this extraordinary civil rights leader in song, speech, dance, and fellowship. Let us truly lift every voice and sing in commemoration and celebration of a life well lived by Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Thank you, and God bless.
Now allow me to bring to the podium the Superintendent of Lawton Public Schools, Dr. Tom Deegan.
Good evening, everybody. It's kind of hard to hide, but I'm 48 years old now. Used to be a different color. And being 48, for you students, that sounds like a big number. But I want everybody to understand that I never grew up in a segregated world. I never went to school separately from other students. And I want us to recognize that so many of our students and our staff members cannot even imagine the world that Dr. King changed to benefit all of us who've grown up in a different world, and our students can't even fathom it. But I want to say that we're here tonight to honor Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., and to honor the entire generation that changed our nation forever, for the better, and to make everything better for all of us now. So on behalf of Lawton Public Schools, on behalf of the Board of Education, our students, our staff, and all the volunteers who came together to put this together, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Deegan. To continue to set the tone of our evening, please check out this video produced by Victoria and Gerardo from our amazing LPS Communications Department.
Everyone's different.
Everybody having their opinion.
So everybody can hear their voices.
It has to be constructive.
Everybody has different ideas.
They get to express themselves.
Everyone has their voice heard. When I think of Lift Every Voice, I really think of like the First Amendment and freedom of speech and how everyone has that right to be heard, that right to speak their mind and their opinions. And it's also important to listen to others when they're speaking and hear their voice without any like judgment or prejudice. That's really important to me.
Just everyone being equal and that treating each other equally is important. And when you're lifting your voice and you're saying your ideas, you also have to listen to other ideas too.
Lift Every Voice is the African American national anthem, so when I hear that, I think about that because for a long period of time, African Americans' opinions and voices didn't really matter, so like Lift Every Voice is pretty important to me.
What comes to mind is just encouraging people to speak up for what they believe in and like the different ideas they have, and not being afraid to speak up just because of what others might think, because you never know whatever you might say will have an impact or will possibly lead to a change.
What comes to my mind is back when there were minorities and women didn't really have a voice, and now everybody is entitled to the freedom of speech and has the opportunity to allow their opinion be heard.
A lot of people may feel as though they don't get a chance to have their voices heard. So lifting every voice, you give those people who feel like they don't have that opportunity, the opportunity to speak.
Everybody's sharing their opinion on different things, and not only sharing it, but everybody else listening to it.
Not all disagreements are bad, some of them are good, and it's just about the decisions that we make and the way that we take what we say is disagreed by other people.
Everybody definitely doesn't have to agree with one particular opinion, But when there are disagreements, I believe that we should be able to come to a peaceful way to basically agree to disagree. You don't have to force your opinion upon someone else who doesn't agree with you.
We're not all the same, and like not everyone's gonna agree with you. And so, but like, it should still be respected because, like I said before, we're all human beings.
We all have rights, and so we all have the right to speech and the freedom of speech. And it's okay to agree to disagree whenever we share each other's opinions.
There's always room for disagreements. You don't have to all be the same. You always have to be different. Diversity, it's human nature.
We're all different, incredibly different, and it's important that we have that diversity in the world. And of course there's room for disagreement. We're all going to disagree on something. Diversity in the community, I mean, of course I was born and raised in Lawton, and being a military town, you see a lot of diversity. Diversity, you have to have, different backgrounds, different races, different sexualities, difference everywhere, no matter across the spectrum. And it's important to have that diversity in every community because then you're learning from each other, you're bouncing off of each other.
A lot of people on our team, from different backgrounds, different social statuses and stuff. And so we have to kind of understand that. You can't just assume everybody's like you, everybody is different. So you have to be open-minded and willing to learn.
The way that we can go to school all together, we can work together, people from different backgrounds, different races, it's really important. And just to lift every voice and listen to others, and that's just a great thing to have in your school and in your community.
I think diversity is important in our community because just like as the population keeps growing, there's a lot more people with like different racial backgrounds and ethnicities, and so it's important because we can learn from one another, like different ideas from like different parts of the world or like different mindsets, so it could really help.
Diversity in our community, to me, it doesn't really mean races as much as the different people with different styles, different creative ways of thinking, different life experiences. It always keeps us on our toes.
When you're lifting your voice,
Lead to a change.
Work together.
Be constructive.
learn more things, everybody helping each other.
We're all human beings.
It is encouraging to hear from people who believe each person and every voice matters. Here is the LPS Children's Choir lifting their voices with the famous freedom song, "We Shall Overcome."
We shall
What a hopeful and inspiring song. Thank you for sharing your talents. The LPS Children's Choir is under the direction of Miss Jessica Martin from John Adams Elementary. Now here's Assistant Superintendent Dr. Jamie Pope to introduce our speaker.
Thank you. Good evening. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our speaker for tonight. Ms. Barbara Ellis, the Assistant Superintendent of Lawton Public Schools, Business Operations. During her tenure with Lawton Public Schools, she has held the following positions: Executive Director of Middle Schools, Director of Secondary Education, Central Junior High School Principal, Central Junior High School Assistant Principal, Eisenhower School Counselor, Eisenhower Junior High School Mathematics teacher beginning in 1973. She has worked as an instructor with the Fort Sill High School Completion Program, Community Adult Continuing Education Program, and Summer School Program. She pursued a doctoral degree in educational administration at the University of Oklahoma with an emphasis on the perception of mentoring as it relates to academic achievement through increased grade point average, decreased absences, and decreased occurrences of negative behavior that impedes learning. She holds a Master's of Education degree in Educational Administration from the University of Oklahoma, Master of Education in Secondary Counseling from Southwestern Oklahoma State University, and a Bachelor of Science degree in Mathematics from SC State College. Her educational and personal philosophies are deeply entwined. Develop a sense of self, a positive regard for others, and a respect for education. Education is the equalizer, giving everyone a personal opportunity to achieve their desired level of accomplishment, regardless of other stations recognized by society. She is married to Charles Chick Ellis for 41 years, and between them, they have 4 children, 23 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. I produce and introduce Ms. Barbara Ellis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not ever going to give anybody that bio ever again. I think that's too much to read. I am very pleased to be your speaker of the evening. I'm truly inspired by all of the programs that have gone on before and all of the speakers that have gone on before, simply because I think I've attended every one of them. I definitely hope that I can deliver to you all that you expect this evening. First of all, our theme, Lift Every Voice, is presented this year, and I think it's related to the Black Heritage Month national anthem, Lift Every Voice, but many of you relate to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for Black Heritage Month. It's not so. Dr. King is more closely associated with the equal rights of all people, even though he is the most celebrated African American in the civil rights movement. He transitioned from the Southern Christian Leadership Foundation to a humanitarian, seeking the rights of all citizens to political and social freedom and equality. Dr. King spoke at over 2,500 events. He delivered up to 400 speeches every year, and no one really knows how many speeches he actually gave. Scholars actually disagree over what distinguishes his speeches from his sermons, or his speeches from his lectures, or whether it's unanticipated remarks that have been simply jotted down, commentaries, or discussions. But all have determined that he was very eloquent and very timely in his deliveries. Now let's be clear. I just need for you to know that theme, Lift Every Voice, does not mean I'm going to sing to you. Many of you know I can't carry a tune in a handbasket. I guarantee you that I'm not going to sing a solo or solo, but in a chorus, I can carry that tune. So, having our voices not in isolation, perhaps by the end of this program, we can all sing together, and together, once blended, will have a melodious sound, lending to the thought that our voices will bring about a new era as the humanitarian efforts in Latin America continue to grow and thrive. Now, you've heard this paraphrased in many ways, but one of Dr. King's first illustrations states, "A man dies when he refuses to stand up for that which is right. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for justice. A man dies when he refuses to take a stand for that which is true." First of all, who talks like that? Who talks like that? This is from a sermon that he delivered on March 8th in 1965. He couldn't be silenced during his lifetime, and his speeches now last on. He lives in the lives of all Americans, and our country, he professes, would never become the powerful nation that it was intended to become if it were not for people who spoke up for the rights of all people. This is the context of Lift Every Voice that I'm going to share with you this evening. Dr. King received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. He ended one of his orations with this: "I think Alfred Nobel would know what I mean when I say I accept this award with the spirit of a curator of some precious heirloom which he holds in trust for its true owners." That means that he didn't believe he was the owner of all of those responsibilities. "All those to whom beauty is truth and truth is beauty, in whose eyes the beauty of genuine brotherhood and peace is more precious than diamonds or silver or gold." Again, who talks like that? Dr. King did. Now, I've been asked to speak to you on this occasion, and I can't remotely give you a speech as eloquent as his, but I do promise to deliver you, from my perspective, the thoughts that represent a story in time, my story. I want to speak to you of an era that many of you will be unfamiliar with. Even my children, my grandchildren, think that it was thousands of years ago, even though it was only 7 decades ago. You see, I was born into a segregated America. I was born in South Carolina in 1950. The Jim Crow laws were alive and well. Blacks and whites had a relationship of tolerance in a separate but equal coexistence. There were places that were accessible to my family and other places that were not. The rules of segregation were real. The unspoken rules were learned by both prominent races. My family actually lived in the same community that owned my slave ancestors on my father's side of the family. We were closely related, and we were familially related. Huge plantations that once had been separated now into small parcels of land. We still knew who the Boykins were, both black and white. And outside of formal gatherings, there was a familiarity between the groups. However, in formal gatherings, in public places, the rules had to be maintained. The relationships were not recognized. This was a life that I knew until age 4. I can still remember my mother and my father working relationships where my mother trained horses for the Carolina steeplechase races. She was very small, about 4'2". My father, who was a brick mason, built structures such as walkways, or brick gateways, was very talented, and he built those for the great houses. These are memories of happy times when I was 4. I played and I understood a little of the strained relations that my parents experienced living in the South. Interesting also because my mother had never experienced this life. You see, her family was born in Virginia. She came from a working class people. Her mother was a seamstress, her father was a Pullman porter. But no one talked about strained relations in front of the children, about the hard times. So I had no idea that it was bad. It just was. In 1956, my family, my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, and I moved to Massachusetts. Talk about a dichotomy. As I remember, it was in the spring, and I was there for 3 years, which means I started first grade there. I was in a school where all but one of the children were white, and that other child was Portuguese. Think about that. I hope you get my small dilemma. Massachusetts was not segregated. Now let's put this in perspective today. My grandson and I were walking into a local business a couple of years ago, and he looked at me, he was about 7, and he said, "Grandma, look at all those black people." And first of all, I was looking to see who heard him say that. Just want you to know. I looked around and I saw an older couple, and they were not African American, and they had a very shocked look on their face. And then I began to see from his perspective. We were going into a store that had black mannequins with no features. Black and white, colors, just like crayons in a Crayola box. That was his perspective. Think about that for a moment. That's what our children know today. But what would you think, depending on your point of reference? Some of you may need to hear this a little bit later, so if you want to talk to me, you're welcome to. As I returned to South Carolina in 4th grade, I was in for such a surprise because I was the only child in my class that was fair. There were only black children in my school. Do you get my dilemma yet? By now, I'm aware that there are differences, but I needed to relearn all of the Jim Crow laws, all of the rules. What a strange America this was. There was no pizza. There was no library in South Carolina. Those were the things that I wanted. And you see, these 2 things were there, but they were located uptown. And we could only go downtown. How could anyone understand where to go and what to do? And this was in 1959, not so long ago. In 1962, I returned to Massachusetts again for 8th grade, and I attended school with everyone again. The following year, I returned to South Carolina to a segregated high school. This is 8 years after Brown versus the Board of Education ruling that said schools would be desegregated. This was in 1966, and schools were still not desegregated. The official resistance in South Carolina was still firm after the Brown versus the Board of Education ruling. Living through segregation for me was so interesting, so interesting. The pressure that it was applied to the federal courts and the Department of Education, Health and Welfare, the Office of Civil Rights, and those agencies slowly caused desegregation to occur, but it was very gradual. Now, the first time I delivered a speech about Dr. Martin Luther King was in May of 1968. This was about a month after Dr. King was assassinated. It was my graduation speech. In retrospect, I wonder what kind of impression I made on my community, because you see, again, it was segregated. I discussed the following realizations from my perspective. I am a graduating senior. First of all, the status of race relations in America today. This was a speech entitled A Realistic Look at the Question of Progress in the Area of Race Relations, delivered at St. Louis in 1957 by Dr. King. The purpose of this message was for me to prepare for the upcoming changes with full integration. So many people believed that race relations had not moved far or quickly, but they had. And after revisiting the thought of how my high school was going to change at the beginning of the next school year, I thought that it was a perspective that had to be considered at that time. The quote that I remember is as follows: "Not everybody can be famous, but everybody can be great, because greatness is determined by service. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love." Again, who talks like that? You see, we all need a reason to behave, and we all need a reason to believe. We only have a little while to influence. And as a 17-year-old, I could only see as far ahead as my rose-colored glasses would let me. Many of the students at my high school felt that our identity was going to be lost because we were now not going to be a school together or separated. You see, the school was going to be closed, and full integration was court-ordered. We all needed a new reality of how to begin with a new perspective, no longer all black, together. As I researched for this speech, I also noticed that Dr. King's voice was changing. He was talking more about a united America, where many were questioning if there was any progress at all. My high school closed. It reopened as a middle school. It was gone. The second part of my speech was the I Have a Dream speech. It was delivered to over 250,000 civil rights marchers in 1963, overlooking the reflecting pool of the Lincoln Monument. This was one of the most remembered speeches of all times. And some of the issues that the marchers hoped to accomplish included an end to segregation in public schools, protection from police abuse, and to get laws passed that would prevent discrimination in employment. Does this sound familiar? Some of the same things we're doing today, right? Now, since the reality of desegregation, which means an era where there were a few students mixed in, was beginning to end, I felt that I needed to point out how the voice of Dr. King and his efforts were finally causing change in my home community, in my hometown. The decision to include this statement, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character," was important to me. I had lived in both of those two very real worlds with 2 sets of rules. I lived in confusion. I knew how to behave. I knew what it was like to be judged by the color of my skin, even when I didn't know or accept the realization that I was supposed to be a second-class citizen. The third thing that I addressed in the speech is, what is your blueprint for life? This is a speech that Dr. King gave to a group of 8th grade students in 1967. And this was because I thought all of my classmates needed to have an understanding that this was our last day in school. The next day, we would be graduates. If we hadn't already determined what our blueprint was, we were going to need one. The words of Dr. King here say, "It is an inspiration that regardless of what we do, we should always aspire to be the best we can be at what we do. And when you discover what you will be in your life, set out to do it as if God Almighty called you at this particular moment in time to do it. Don't just set out to do a good job, set out to do such a good job that the living, the dead, or the unborn couldn't do it any better. If it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, and all of you know the street sweeper speech, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Leontine Price sings before the Metropolitan Opera. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all of the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. If you can't be a pine at the top of the hill, be a shrub in the valley. Be the best shrub on the side of a hill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, be a trail. If you can't be a sun, be a star, for it isn't by size that you win or fail. Be the best of whatever you are. Imagine an 8th grader hearing that speech. Imagine a senior hearing that speech. But again, who talks like that? This leaves me now with my voice and what I want each of you to leave with. When you leave this program tonight, we have to be of one voice. We must sing the same tune. We must blend our sound together to make a joyful noise. And that noise must call for every voice, not one, not yours, not mine, every voice to be lifted so every individual can be heard. And the message has to be the same. That message is for all people, not some people. Dr. King came full circle in the 1960s. His voice and his eloquence and his delivery still rings out today with the relevant and timeless quotes to inspire greatness for all people. The I Have a Dream speech is not only relevant because of its significance, but it's probably the most misunderstood speech. He was actually advised not to use that statement, I have a dream, so much in the speech because it sounded too cliche or too packaged. The purpose of this speech was to reflect on the visions of our founding fathers, and Dr. King quotes this vision, and this is where we're going. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note, a note to which every American will fall heir. This note was the promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So as I leave you this evening, I'm going to tell you, lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty, then peace and compassion and caring and concern for every human situation, supporting the common good, beginning with valuing all people. Deep in our hearts, all that we want is the best for our loved ones, the best for our community, the best for our world. If he could hear me now, I would say to Dr. King, 51 years after his death, we're still moving forward. We're still trying to lift every voice, but again, the voice for all people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis, for sharing with us this evening. We are grateful for your years of dedicated service to our district. To start the second half of the program, let's bring out the Gentry Singers from Eisenhower High School for a powerful selection reminding us that every voice matters. Please stand. Please be seated. Now that was truly touching and beautiful. The Gentry Singers are under the direction of Miss Debbie Wood. We are now ready to present the awards for our essay and art contest. Please welcome back to the stage Dr. Jamie Polk.
I'm going to ask if Amelius Weeks, if you're in the audience, please come forward, as well as Tiana Fields. If you're in the audience, please come forward. As they come, I would like to let everyone know for the essay contest, this essay went throughout the district, and the students had an opportunity to share. It is posted in the cafeteria for your viewing and your reading. So we'll ask if you will, after the ceremony, go and take a look. Ms. Weeks is a third grader from Lincoln Elementary, and if you're in the house, we'll ask that you come forward. If not, we will ensure you receive your plaque as well as $50. Let's give her a hand. We also had an art contest, and that student, Tiana Fields, is a fifth grader from Whittier Elementary, and her piece, along with other pieces, are also displayed in the cafeteria. She too will receive $50. We say thank you for your efforts, students.
What an awesome effort and honor. Let's give them all a hand. This has turned out to be an amazing evening, but we're not done yet. Word has it that the Lawton High drum line is in the building. Bring out that Wolverine percussion. Wow, that was awesome and loud. It is now time to honor some more students and community members. Please welcome Bracia Lewis, our awards chair, as she presents some special awards.
Thank you. It was such a privilege and honor to be asked to be a part of this celebration for Dr. King. I am also grateful that I had the honor of helping select the individuals who will be receiving these awards tonight. The first recipients are two young adults who have embodied Dr. King's life's purpose, celebrate diversity, and live in the character that he displayed. Dr. King stated that faith is taking the first step even when you can't see the whole staircase. We applaud and are proud of our Young Achiever winners, Madison James and Mikhail Witherspoon. Madison and Mikhail could not be here this evening, so we will be accepting the awards on their behalf. Oh, Madison and Mikhail, come on up, come on up. Our next award that I will be presenting is the Community Service Award. The recipient of the Community Service Award has a list of numerous compliments that I did not have the time or enough paper to write down. Just to name a few of them, he takes care of the young athletes in the city, he takes care of his students at Cleveland Elementary, and provides in any way that he can to make sure that no one is going without anything. Our Community Service Award winner is Mr. Calvin Prince. Lastly, our Lifetime Achievement Award winner. What can I say about our Lifetime Achievement Award winner? When I was a student at Lawton Public Schools, I always heard this person's name, but never had the opportunity to meet her. All I knew was that she would get the job done. Now, as an adult and a Lawton Public Schools teacher, I always heard this name, but still had never met her. But I knew she would get the job done. When I did finally meet her, I watched how she entered the room and how everyone just adored her presence, respected her words, and was just captivated by her energy. I now finally saw why she got things done. It is with a sad heart that she will be retiring this year, but I have truly enjoyed being in her presence every chance I had. I now have another role model to look up to. Please join me in welcoming our Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Ms. Barbara Ellis. Oh, come on, let's go to that side. Thank you.
Congratulations to all the recipients, and thank you for your commitment to lift every voice. We will now hear again from the LPS Children's Choir, accompanied by the super talented Catherine Adams. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this wonderful occasion. We are especially grateful to Lawton High School and Head Principal Gerald Jones for hosting the 2019 LPS MLK celebration. Now here's the Lawton High School Advanced Orchestra to close the show. That concludes our program. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Please join us for a mix and mingle reception in the cafeteria where you will find our winning essays and artworks displayed.